Vikings fans, to another edition of Vikings on SI right here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. Jonathan Harrison here, joined by Will Ragatz. And Will, we've got the blockbuster trade that all Vikings fans I know were looking forward to seeing coming down the news wires on a late Tuesday afternoon at this point. Cam Akers back in Minnesota. What can you say about this trade that just came out across the wires here a little bit ago?
Yeah, we were getting ready to do a video, and I was like, maybe we'll talk about what Brian Flores said today about the Lions, or look ahead to that game, talk about the NFC North. But no, we got a trade to talk about, and my initial reaction is this trade makes a lot of sense as a low risk, not necessarily super high reward, but a much needed deal for the Vikings offense as their first move ahead of the trade deadline. Interestingly, it's basically the exact same trade that they made last year to get Cam Akers from the Rams in September 23. They're trading a conditional 2026 sixth rounder for Akers and a conditional 2026 seventh rounder. Now, last year, those conditions didn't hit, so the picks didn't transfer because Akers obviously tore his Achilles for the second time in his career in his sixth game with the Vikings in that Josh Dobbs miracle win in Atlanta. This year, if Akers does play, and we don't know what those conditions are necessarily, but if he does play and help the Vikings, then at worst, it's just a late round pick swap in 2026 for a guy who can help you now. And I think it's important to clarify off the top that this does not mean anything necessarily about Aaron Jones. This should not send Vikings fans into some panic of, oh no, Aaron Jones is out for a month. This is horrible. Like, it just, they needed depth regardless. Jones, I don't know if he's going to play on Sunday against the Lions with his hip injury, or if maybe he'll return against the Rams, or maybe even miss 2 games, which seems unlikely given that he was able to practice on Monday already. But the Vikings needed depth either way, because without Jones, it was just Ty Chandler and Myles Gaskin. We saw what happened to their offense when Jones went down in London against the Jets. And maybe this move says a little bit more about Ty Chandler and not totally feeling comfortable in him in that every down role in the event that Jones misses time, whether that's this week or at any point in the future.
What is Cam Akers' likely role in this offense? Should he see some playing time here, which I imagine he will with the running back depth that the Vikings have at the moment. How does he fit into what they plan to do, and what can we pick up from what they had him do last season?
Yeah, I want to just read a quote real quick that some people have pointed out since this trade broke. But Kevin O'Connell was asked about Cam Akers before the Vikings played the Texans in Week 3, and he said, "I love Cam Akers. I got a chance to be around him from his first day being an NFL player, coming off an unbelievable career at Florida State. Cam's a unique, special, and talented person to deal with the type of adversity he has in his young career, and never once have you heard him feel sorry for himself. Incredibly tough player, both mentally and physically." And then he said, "I have a great relationship with him and care about him tremendously." So Kevin O'Connell, I mean, dating back to when he coached him with the Rams, has always been a big fan of Cam Akers, which is why the Vikings traded for him last year. And they liked what he did for them last year before he tore his Achilles. And it just didn't really work out this offseason. Maybe they pursued him to some degree. He ended up with the Texans, and now they're bringing him back. And I don't know exactly where Akers slots into the depth chart. I would assume he's slightly behind Ty Chandler on that pecking order, but he has a chance to play because this is a guy who he can run the ball, he can catch the ball out of the backfield, he can pass protect. He can play on all 3 downs if you need him to. He's just a good, solid player. It's really remarkable that he's been able to overcome already having 2 torn Achilles at 25 years old, and to be able to do what he's done. He averaged over 10 touches per game through the first 4 games of the season for the Texans, scored a couple touchdowns, including the only Texans touchdown of the game against the Vikings at US Bank Stadium a few weeks back. So just a solid running back. PFF grade is in the 70s this year, as it always is with Akers. I think he sees the field at some point for the Vikings, whether that's with Jones being hurt or even with Jones playing. I just think he's somebody you can mix in there and rely on to do his job because he knows this offense. Like it's not just from last season being in Minnesota. He's been with Kevin O'Connell and this offense, which has changed a little bit over the years, but he knows this scheme dating back to the start of his career with the Rams. So really just a logical fit. I was thinking like, the Vikings could use somebody like Cam Akers for their running back depth, but it didn't actually occur to me that they would just trade for Cam Akers again. But I don't know why it didn't occur to me, because it makes a lot of sense. The Texans have Joe Mixon back. He was hurt. Now they've got Mixon, Damian Pierce, Dario Gunbowale. They didn't really need Cam Akers. So just a kind of straightforward, simple, low cost move for the Vikings that I think addresses a pretty obvious need.
Does this? I know you mentioned Ty Chandler and Aaron Jones earlier. Does this say anything about their thinking about what Ty Chandler is able to do in their offense, or how do you think what this says about their prospects of Ty Chandler?
Yeah, it might. I think Chandler is a player that they like. He's a third-year player. He obviously showed some flashes down the stretch last season when Akers was hurt, and Alexander Madison wasn't playing well. Ty Chandler was the RB1 and looked good at times. Had a big game, but I believe it was against the Bengals. And earlier this year, week 2 against the 49ers, 82 yards on 10 carries, showed a lot of burst. He's still, I think, going to be a factor in the Vikings' plans. I wouldn't write him off because of this move. I think the Vikings still like Chandler and what he brings to their offense. It's just adding another piece to it, adding more depth. You can always have more depth, especially at a position like running back where guys can get banged up, especially when your starter, Aaron Jones, who will remain the workhorse back
Right.
to some extent whenever he is healthy. He's 29 years old and has missed some time due to injury. So you need depth. Cam Akers brings that. Ty Chandler's still going to be in the picture. What this probably means more than anything is we're not going to see any more Myles Gaskin the rest of the year. He got a couple carries in that London game, and Gaskin's a fine depth player as well. But they wanted a little more there, and Akers certainly brings that.
Do we imagine there's more moves on the horizon? I mean, we've already seen today alone Devontae Adams traded. We've seen Amari Cooper traded. And a wide receiver wasn't a position, despite some NFL Network analysts saying that they should potentially trade for a wide receiver. That wasn't a position that the Vikings were looking at. But there has been plenty of fan speculation and rumors and innuendo that they should trade for a defensive tackle. And I know friend of the show, Matthew Collar, tweeted out something along the lines of Dalvin Tomlinson probably would want to be back in Minnesota at this point with where Cleveland are at right now. Do we expect another move on the horizon over the next couple weeks here? Trade deadline still 3 weeks away at this point?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, this to me feels like just kind of the start. It's a move that helps the Vikings right now, which is why the timing of it is useful. I mean, there's a real chance that Aaron Jones doesn't play in this big game against the Lions on Sunday, and Cam Akers does play in that game as the RB2 or maybe just split in the backfield with Ty Chandler. So that's why the timing of this makes sense. But yeah, there's still 3 weeks until the trade deadline. We know from his tenure here, 2.5 years, that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is not afraid to make trades. He loves to deal and to make those calls and to add to the roster. So I think we see more. We talked about it on this channel last week that there were 4 positions that make sense: running back, right guard, defensive tackle, and cornerback. Dalton Reisner at right guard was just activated, his practice window was opened on Monday, his 21-day window to at some point be activated from injured reserve. And he spoke in the locker room and said he's 100% healthy and kind of made it sound like he's been healthy for a little bit and he's ready to roll. So I don't know that right guard is a huge need. If they've got Reisner back, maybe it would have to be somebody like a Brandon Scherff who would be clearly better than both Dalton Reisner and Ed Ingram. And there aren't a lot of those guys available, and depends on what the price would be. But yeah, I think you still look to the other 2 positions we talked about, defensive tackle and corner. Defensive tackle more notably than corner because of the Vikings' depth on the roster. So yeah, I don't think that this will be the only trade the Vikings make. I do think a move for a defensive tackle feels like the next most pressing need now that they've addressed this running back situation. We'll see. That could happen at any minute, but also it could wait a few weeks as the trade deadline gets a little closer and teams maybe become more open to selling.
It'll happen by the time we post this video here in a little bit. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it always seems to happen like that.
All right, good stuff from you today, Will. We'll talk to you right back here on the channel tomorrow with another topic across Minnesota sports. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to the channel. Does help us out. Does help us get found. Also notifies you every time we post a new video here at Bring Me the Sports. We'll talk to you tomorrow, Minnesota sports fans.